So there have been a number of attacks, and there's a police operation called Operation Badger. I know because I was a part of it when I was an MP, and I benefited from it. Operation Badger kicks into play when an MP receives malicious, vexatious threats which have substance, and when something untoward happens. So what happened was Operation Badger kicked in, the police went out to the village, they went out to Tobias's home, and for 3 hours they stood and watched the protesters and took no action. It's very serious. And although we've got to be careful, obviously, not to conflate murder with protest, I don't think protest should take place anywhere near an MP's home. Not just because they've got families, but they have a right to their own safety, their own feelings of security, their own privacy. I think it's disgusting. I've also noticed in recent months, since October the 7th, and Israel's response, and we can talk about that maybe later in the programme, I think it's heavy-handed to say the least, but we have noticed that some Labour MPs' constituency offices have been targeted by protests. I feel very uncomfortable about that as well.
Mike Freer's office was burnt down.
And I want to be clear about this. It doesn't matter which party you belong to as an MP. You should feel secure and safe in your democratic duties.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there have been quite a few such incidents in the last few months. Michael Gove was mobbed at Victoria Station, Angela Rayner...
But what was Michael Gove doing when every single MP heeded the warnings not to go into London that day? He could have gone anywhere. He could have taken any other...
Can't victim blame, mustn't victim blame.
Oh, no, I'm not... Well, I just think it's utterly bizarre that, you know, a front-bench minister who is living in... Well, anyway, we're not going to go into that, but claims to require police protection would walk through a massive protest on a day that was happening. I've said it before, I'll say it again. It was bizarre that he was walking through that protest. We have to take some responsibility to... MPs, I'm not an MP anymore, but MPs have to take some responsibility also to look after their own safety and to make sensible judgments in order not to compromise.
How awful that it's necessary that an MP can't travel through a busy a strategic London station for his own safety. I mean, that to me is such a worrying state of affairs.
So there was a major protest going on, and MPs do receive warnings. So, you know, I mean, there's...
Yeah. We don't tell women not to walk on the streets at night because there are bad men around.
We do, and you know what? We tell women to look after their own safety. We do.
These protests are becoming a problem if every single weekend London is a place where certain people feel uncomfortable, whether it's politicians or whether it's ordinary Jewish people living in London feel uncomfortable going into the city centre. This is a new and awful development, in my opinion. And, you know, I think sometimes there has been a tendency to, I don't know, when something abhorrent happens, you know, the murder of an MP, I remember the weeks that followed, for example, the murder of David Amess by an Islamist. Parliament was often talking about, like, civility online and sort of nasty tweets as if that were the problem. Like, I think that we really have to be quite frank about what is going on here, and you know.
Well, it does matter, though, doesn't it? You talk about politicians taking responsibility. It does matter what comes out of the mouths or the pens of our politicians, particularly when they are very senior. We're talking about Jews here, and there are very few Jews in this country. We should be reminded of this. 200,000 or so, something like that. Yeah. And I feel this very strongly. You know, my grandparents were victims of Hitler. They were refugees kicked out of their homes. I also feel very strongly about Islamophobia. And we had the example of Boris Johnson when he was Foreign Secretary writing in the Telegraph, mocking women wearing hijabs. Politicians have to take responsibility for their language.
But I don't see what that has to do. I mean, in that column, I would defend that column because, not just because I work at the Telegraph, but Boris Johnson was defending a woman's right to wear the hijab.
At the same time as playing to his base and mocking it.
I have to come in on this. You know, I will never, ever hear a defence for a medieval process that feels a woman should be covered up because if she weren't, men may not be able to control their sexual
but people have the right, women have the right to wear it without being mocked by the Foreign Secretary.
You know what? I'm a Christian. People make fun of my religion all the time.
You're not a minority in our country, though, are you?
No, not an ethnic minority.
You're not wearing a hijab. You know very well if you're on the tube, you're not going to be attacked for being a Christian. If you're a woman wearing a hijab, whether it's your choice or not, and most women wearing the hijab will say it is their choice, you know that they are vulnerable. And if you're the Foreign Secretary, you shouldn't play into that.
Well, let's speak out for the Iranian women who are protesting.
I think you have to be careful not to make politicians guilty for something that thugs and thuggery that other people have done. if people are being thugs, then that's what that society, that the authorities need to come down on them like a ton of bricks. I don't think the threat of that happening should mean that we can't make, you know,
he was mocking.
humour.
He was using his words.
Oh, guys,
to
listen,
mock.
Matthew, I'm not going to let you use the show to do your little rants about Boris Johnson, his comments that were in the Daily Telegraph years ago. I'm just not allowing that.